Welcome back to Buddhist audiobook shelf. Today marks the beginning of our exploration into Chapter 4, covering right speech, right action, right livelihood of the Noble Eightfold Path. Authored by Bhikkhu Bodhi and expertly transformed into audiobook format by Buddhist audiobook shelf, this segment unveils the pathway to the cessation of suffering. Embracing the Buddha's timeless teachings, we aim to extend their reach far and wide for the benefit of humanity. The diligent efforts of Buddhist audiobook shelf have brought this wisdom to the auditory realm, and now it's your turn to contribute. Help us disseminate this knowledge by subscribing, liking, and sharing this video. Let's embark on this enlightening journey together. Chapter 4. Right speech, right action, right livelihood. The next three path factors, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, may be treated together, as collectively. They make up the first of the three divisions of the path, the division of moral discipline. Though the principles laid down in this section restrain immoral actions and promote good conduct, their ultimate purpose is not so much ethical as spiritual. They are not prescribed merely as guides to action, but primarily as aids to mental purification. As a necessary measure for human well-being, ethics has its own justification in the Buddha's teaching, and its importance cannot be underrated. But in the special context of the Noble Eightfold Path, ethical principles are subordinate to the path's governing goal, final deliverance from suffering. Thus, for the moral training to become a proper part of the path, it has to be taken up under the tutelage of the first two factors, right view and right intention, and to lead beyond to the trainings in concentration and wisdom. Though the training in moral discipline is listed first among the three groups of practices, it should not be regarded lightly. It is the foundation for the entire path, essential for the success of the other trainings. The Buddha himself frequently urged his disciples to adhere to the rules of discipline, seeing danger in the slightest fault. One time, when a monk approached the Buddha and asked for the training in brief, the Buddha told him, "First establish yourself in the starting point of wholesome states, that is, in purified moral discipline and in right view. Then, when your moral discipline is purified and your view straight, you should practice the four foundations of mindfulness." The Pali word we have been translating as moral discipline, sila, appears in the texts with several overlapping meanings, all connected with right conduct. In some contexts it means action, conforming to moral principles, in others the principles themselves, in still others the virtuous qualities of character that result from the observance of moral principles. Sila, in the sense of precepts or principles, represents the formalistic side of the ethical training. Sila is virtue, the animating spirit, and sila is right conduct, the expression of virtue in real-life situations. Often sila is formally defined as abstinence from unwholesome bodily and verbal action. This definition, with its stress on outer action, appears superficial. Other explanations, however, make up for the deficiency and reveal that there is more to sila than is evident at first glance. The Abhidharma, for example, equates sila with the mental factors of abstinence, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, an equation which makes it clear that what is really being cultivated through the observance of moral precepts is the mind. Thus, while the training in sila brings the public benefit of inhibiting socially detrimental actions, it entails the personal benefit of mental purification, preventing the defilements from dictating to us what lines of conduct we should follow. The English word morality and its derivatives suggest a sense of obligation and constraint, quite foreign to the Buddhist conception of sila. This connotation probably enters from the theistic background to Western ethics. Buddhism, with its non-theistic framework, grounds its ethics not on the notion of obedience, but on that of harmony. In fact, the commentaries explain the word sila by another word, samadhana, meaning harmony or coordination. The observance of sila leads to harmony at several levels: social, psychological, karmic, and contemplative. At the social level, the principles of sila help to establish harmonious interpersonal relations, welding the mass of differently constituted members of society with their own private interests and goals into a cohesive social order in which conflict, if not utterly eliminated, is at least reduced. At the psychological level, Sila brings harmony to the mind, protection from the inner split caused by guilt and remorse over moral transgressions. At the karmic level, the observance of Sila ensures harmony with the cosmic law of karma, hence favorable results in the course of future movement through the round of repeated birth and death. And at the fourth level, the contemplative, Sila helps establish the preliminary purification of mind to be completed, in a deeper and more thorough way, by the methodical development of serenity and insight. When briefly defined, the factors of moral training are usually worded negatively, in terms of abstinence. But there is more to Sila than refraining from what is wrong. Each principle embedded in the precepts, as we will see, actually has two aspects, both essential to the training as a whole. One is abstinence from the unwholesome, the other commitment to the wholesome. The former is called avoidance and the latter performance. At the outset of training, the Buddha stresses the aspect of avoidance. He does so, not because abstinence from the unwholesome is sufficient in itself, but to establish the steps of practice in proper sequence. The steps are set out in their natural order, more logical than temporal, in the famous dictum of the Dharmapada. To abstain from all evil, to cultivate the good, and to purify one's mind, this is the teaching of the Buddhas. The other two steps, cultivating the good and purifying the mind, also receive their due, but to ensure their success, a resolve to avoid the unwholesome is a necessity. Without such a resolve, the attempt to develop wholesome qualities is bound to issue in a warped and stunted pattern of growth. The training in moral discipline governs the two principal channels of outer action, speech and body, as well as another area of vital concern, one's way of earning a living. Thus the training contains three factors: right speech, right action, and right livelihood. These we will now examine individually, following the order in which they are set forth in the usual exposition of the path. Right speech. The Buddha divides right speech into four components: abstaining from false speech, abstaining from slanderous speech, abstaining from harsh speech, and abstaining from idle chatter. Because the effects of speech are not as immediately evident as those of bodily action, its importance and potential is easily overlooked. But a little reflection will show that speech and its offshoot, the written word, can have enormous consequences for good or for harm. In fact, whereas for beings such as animals who live at the pre-verbal level, physical action is of dominant concern, for humans immersed in verbal communication, speech gains the ascendancy. Speech can break lives, create enemies, and start wars, or it can give wisdom, heal divisions, and create peace. This has always been so, yet in the modern age the positive and negative potentials of speech have been vastly multiplied by the tremendous increase in the means, speed, and range of communications. The capacity for verbal expression, oral and written, has often been regarded as the distinguishing mark of the human species. From this we can appreciate the need to make this capacity the means to human excellence, rather than, as too often has been the case, the sign of human degradation. 1. Abstaining from false speech. Herein someone avoids false speech and abstains from it. He speaks the truth, is devoted to truth, reliable, worthy of confidence, not a deceiver of people. Being at a meeting, or amongst people, or in the midst of his relatives, or in a society, or in the king's court, and called upon and asked as witness to tell what he knows, he answers, if he knows nothing, I know nothing, and if he knows, he answers, I know. If he has seen nothing, he answers, I have seen nothing, and if he has seen, he answers, I have seen. Thus he never knowingly speaks a lie, either for the sake of his own advantage, or for the sake of another person's advantage, or for the sake of any advantage whatsoever. This statement of the Buddha discloses both the negative and the positive sides to the precept. The negative side is abstaining from lying, the positive side speaking the truth. The determinative factor behind the transgression is the intention to deceive. If one speaks something false believing it to be true, There is no breach of the precept, as the intention to deceive is absent. Though the deceptive intention is common to all cases of false speech, lies can appear in different guises depending on the motivating root, whether greed, hatred, or delusion. Greed as the chief motive results in the lie aimed at gaining some personal advantage for oneself, or for those close to oneself, material wealth, position, respect, or admiration. With hatred as the motive, false speech takes the form of the malicious lie, the lie intended to hurt and damage others. When delusion is the principal motive, the result is a less pernicious type of falsehood. The irrational lie, the compulsive lie, the interesting exaggeration, lying for the sake of a joke. The Buddha's stricture against lying rests upon several reasons. For one thing, lying is disruptive to social cohesion. People can live together in society only in an atmosphere of mutual trust, where they have reason to believe that others will speak the truth. By destroying the grounds for trust and inducing mass suspicion, widespread lying becomes the harbinger signaling the fall from social solidarity to chaos. But lying has other consequences of a deeply personal nature at least equally disastrous. By their very nature, lies tend to proliferate. Lying once and finding our words suspect, we feel compelled to lie again to defend our credibility, to paint a consistent picture of events. So the process repeats itself. The lies stretch, multiply, and connect until they lock us into a cage of falsehoods from which it is difficult to escape. The lie is thus a miniature paradigm for the whole process of subjective illusion. In each case, the self-assured creator, sucked in by his own deceptions, eventually winds up their victim. Such considerations probably lie behind the words of counsel the Buddha spoke to his son, the young novice Rahula, soon after the boy was ordained. One day the Buddha came to Rahula, pointed to a bowl with a little bit of water in it, and asked, "Rahula, do you see this bit of water left in the bowl?" Rahula answered, "Yes, sir." So little, Rahula, is the spiritual achievement of one who is not afraid to speak a deliberate lie. Then the Buddha threw the water away, put the bowl down, and said, "Do you see, Rahula, how that water has been discarded?" In the same way, one who tells a deliberate lie discards whatever spiritual achievement he has made. Again he asked, "Do you see how this bowl is now empty?" In the same way, one who has no shame in speaking lies is empty of spiritual achievement. Then the Buddha turned the bowl upside down and said, "Do you see, Rahula, how this bowl has been turned upside down?" In the same way, one who tells a deliberate lie turns his spiritual achievements upside down and becomes incapable of progress. Therefore, the Buddha concluded, one should not speak a deliberate lie even in jest. It is said that in the course of his long training for enlightenment over many lives, a bodhisattva can break all the moral precepts except the pledge to speak the truth. The reason for this is very profound and reveals that the commitment to truth has a significance transcending the domain of ethics and even mental purification, taking us to the domains of knowledge and being. Truthful speech provides, in the sphere of interpersonal communication, a parallel to wisdom in the sphere of private understanding. The two are respectively the outward and inward modalities of the same commitment to what is real. Wisdom consists in the realization of truth, and truth is not just a verbal proposition, but the nature of things as they are. To realize truth, our whole being has to be brought into accord with actuality, with things as they are, which requires that in communications with others we respect things as they are by speaking the truth. Truthful speech establishes a correspondence between our own inner being and the real nature of phenomena, allowing wisdom to rise up and fathom their real nature. Thus, much more than an ethical principle, devotion to truthful speech is a matter of taking our stand on reality rather than illusion, on the truth grasped by wisdom, rather than the fantasies woven by desire. He avoids slanderous speech and abstains from it. What he has heard here he does not repeat there, so as to cause dissension there, and what he has heard there he does not repeat here, so as to cause dissension here. Thus he unites those that are divided, and those that are united he encourages. Concord gladdens him, he delights and rejoices in concord, and it is concord that he spreads by his words. Slanderous speech is speech intended to create enmity and division, to alienate one person or group from another. The motive behind such speech is generally aversion, resentment of a rival's success or virtues, the intention to tear down others by verbal denigrations. Other motives may enter the picture as well. The cruel intention of causing hurt to others, the evil desire to win affection for oneself, the perverse delight in seeing friends divided. Slanderous speech is one of the most serious moral transgressions. The root of hate makes the unwholesome karma already heavy enough, but since the action usually occurs after deliberation, the negative force becomes even stronger because premeditation adds to its gravity. When the slanderous statement is false, the two wrongs of falsehood and slander combine to produce an extremely powerful unwholesome karma. The canonical texts record several cases in which the calumny of an innocent party led to an immediate rebirth in the plane of misery. The opposite of slander, as the Buddha indicates, is speech that promotes friendship and harmony. Such speech originates from a mind of loving kindness and sympathy. It wins the trust and affection of others, who feel they can confide in one without fear that their disclosures will be used against them. Beyond the obvious benefits that such speech brings in this present life, it is said that abstaining from slander has as its karmic result the gain of a retinue of friends who can never be turned against one by the slanderous words of others. 3. Abstaining from harsh speech. He avoids harsh language and abstains from it. He speaks such words as are gentle, soothing to the ear, loving, such words as go to the heart, and are courteous, friendly, and agreeable to many. Harsh speech is speech uttered in anger, intended to cause the hearer pain. Such speech can assume different forms, of which we might mention 3. 1 is abusive speech, scolding, reviling, or reproving another angrily with bitter words. A second is insult, hurting another by ascribing to him some offensive quality which detracts from his dignity. A third is sarcasm, speaking to someone in a way which ostensibly lauds him, but with such a tone or twist of phrasing that the ironic intent becomes clear and causes pain. The main root of harsh speech is aversion, assuming the form of anger. Since the defilement in this case tends to work impulsively, without deliberation, the transgression is less serious than slander and the karmic consequence generally less severe. Still, harsh speech is an unwholesome action with disagreeable results for oneself and others, both now and in the future, so it has to be restrained. The ideal antidote is patience, learning to tolerate blame and criticism from others, to sympathize with their shortcomings, to respect differences in viewpoint, to endure abuse without feeling compelled to retaliate. The Buddha calls for patience even under the most trying conditions. Even if monks, robbers and murderers saw through your limbs and joints, whosoever should give way to anger thereat would not be following my advice. For thus ought you to train yourselves. Undisturbed shall our mind remain, with heart full of love, and free from any hidden malice, and that person shall we penetrate with loving thoughts, wide, deep, boundless, freed from anger and hatred. 4. Abstaining from idle chatter. He avoids idle chatter and abstains from it. He speaks at the right time, in accordance with facts, speaks what is useful, speaks of the Dharma and the discipline. His speech is like a treasure, uttered at the right moment, accompanied by reason, moderate and full of sense. Idle chatter is pointless talk, speech that lacks purpose or depth. Such speech communicates nothing of value, but only stirs up the defilements in one's own mind and in others. The Buddha advises that idle talk should be curbed in speech, restricted as much as possible to matters of genuine importance. In the case of a monk, the typical subject of the passage just quoted, his words should be selective and concerned primarily with the Dharma. Lay persons will have more need for affectionate small talk with friends and family, polite conversation with acquaintances, and talk in connection with their line of work. But even then they should be mindful not to let the conversation stray into pastures where the restless mind, always eager for something sweet or spicy to feed on, might find a chance to indulge its defiling propensities. The traditional exegesis of abstaining from idle chatter refers only to avoiding engagement in such talk oneself, but today it might be of value to give this factor a different slant, made imperative by certain developments peculiar to our own time, unknown in the days of the Buddha and the ancient commentators. This is avoiding exposure to the idle chatter, constantly bombarding us through the new media of communication created by modern technology. An incredible array of devices: television, radio, newspapers, pulp journals, the cinema turns out a continuous stream of needless information and distracting entertainment, the net effect of which is to leave the mind passive, vacant, and sterile. All these developments, naively accepted as progress, threaten to blunt our aesthetic and spiritual sensitivities and deafen us to the higher call of the contemplative life. Serious aspirants on the path to liberation have to be extremely discerning in what they allow themselves to be exposed to. They would greatly serve their aspirations by including these sources of amusement and needless information in the category of idle chatter and making an effort to avoid them. Right action. Right action means refraining from unwholesome deeds that occur with the body as their natural means of expression. The pivotal element in this path factor is the mental factor of abstinence, but because this abstinence applies to actions performed through the body, it is called right action. The Buddha mentions three components of right action: abstaining from taking life, abstaining from taking what is not given, and abstaining from sexual misconduct. These we will briefly discuss in order. 1. Abstaining from the taking of life. Herein someone avoids the taking of life and abstains from it. Without stick or sword, conscientious, full of sympathy, he is desirous of the welfare of all sentient beings. Abstaining from taking life has a wider application than simply refraining from killing other human beings. The precept enjoins abstaining from killing any sentient being. A sentient being is a living being endowed with mind or consciousness. For practical purposes, this means human beings, animals, and insects. Plants are not considered to be sentient beings, though they exhibit some degree of sensitivity. They lack full-fledged consciousness, the defining attribute of a sentient being. The taking of life that is to be avoided is intentional killing. The deliberate destruction of life of a being endowed with consciousness. The principle is grounded in the consideration that all beings love life and fear death, that all seek happiness and are averse to pain. The essential determinant of transgression is the volition to kill, issuing in an action that deprives a being of life. Suicide is also generally regarded as a violation, but not accidental killing, as the intention to destroy life is absent. The abstinence may be taken to apply to two kinds of action, the primary and the secondary. The primary is the actual destruction of life, the secondary is deliberately harming or torturing another being without killing it. While the Buddha's statement on non-injury is quite simple and straightforward, later commentaries give a detailed analysis of the principle. A treatise from Thailand, written by an erudite Thai patriarch, collates a mass of earlier material into an especially thorough treatment, which we shall briefly summarize here. The treatise points out that the taking of life may have varying degrees of moral weight entailing different consequences. The three primary variables governing moral weight are the object, the motive, and the effort. With regard to the object, there is a difference in seriousness between killing a human being and killing an animal, the former being karmically heavier, since man has a more highly developed moral sense and greater spiritual potential than animals. Among human beings, the degree of karmic weight depends on the qualities of the person killed and his relation to the killer. Thus, killing a person of superior spiritual qualities or a personal benefactor, such as a parent or a teacher, is an especially grave act. The motive for killing also influences moral weight. Acts of killing can be driven by greed, hatred, or delusion. Of the three, killing motivated by hatred is the most serious, and the weight increases to the degree that the killing is premeditated. The force of effort involved also contributes, the unwholesome karma being proportional to the force and the strength of the defilements. The positive counterpart to abstaining from taking life, as the Buddha indicates, is the development of kindness and compassion for other beings. The disciple not only avoids destroying life, he dwells with a heart full of sympathy, desiring the welfare of all beings. The commitment to non-injury and concern for the welfare of others represent the practical application of the second path factor, right intention, in the form of goodwill and harmlessness. 2. Abstaining from taking what is not given. He avoids taking what is not given and abstains from it, what another person possesses of goods and chattel in the village or in the wood, that he does not take away with thievish intent. 30. Taking what is not given means appropriating the rightful belongings of others with thievish intent. If one takes something that has no owner, such as unclaimed stones, wood, or even gems extracted from the earth, the act does not count as a violation, even though these objects have not been given. But also implied as a transgression, though not expressly stated, is withholding from others what should rightfully be given to them. Commentaries mention a number of ways in which taking what is not given can be committed. Some of the most common may be enumerated. 1. Stealing. Taking the belongings of others secretly, as in housebreaking, pickpocketing, etc. 2. Robbery. Taking what belongs to others openly by force or threats. 3. Snatching. Suddenly pulling away another's possession before he has time to resist. 4. Fraudulence. Gaining possession of another's belongings by falsely claiming them as one's own. 5. Deceitfulness. Using false weights and measures to cheat customers. The degree of moral weight that attaches to the action is determined by 3 factors: the value of the object taken, the qualities of the victim of the theft, and the subjective state of the thief. Regarding the first, moral weight is directly proportional to the value of the object. Regarding the second, the weight varies according to the moral qualities of the deprived individual. Regarding the third, acts of theft may be motivated either by greed or hatred. While greed is the most common cause, hatred may also be responsible, as when one person deprives another of his belongings, not so much because he wants them for himself, as because he wants to harm the latter. Between the two, acts motivated by hatred are karmically heavier than acts motivated by sheer greed. The positive counterpart to abstaining from stealing is honesty, which implies respect for the belongings of others, and for their right to use their belongings as they wish. Another related virtue is contentment, being satisfied with what one has without being inclined to increase one's wealth by unscrupulous means. The most eminent opposite virtue is generosity, giving away one's own wealth and possessions in order to benefit others. 3. Abstaining from sexual misconduct. He avoids sexual misconduct and abstains from it. He has no intercourse with such persons as are still under the protection of father, mother, brother, sister or relatives, nor with married women, nor with female convicts, nor lastly, with betrothed girls. The guiding purposes of this precept, from the ethical standpoint, are to protect marital relations from outside disruption, and to promote trust and fidelity within the marital union. From the spiritual standpoint, it helps curb the expansive tendency of sexual desire, and thus is a step in the direction of renunciation, which reaches its consummation in the observance of celibacy binding on monks and nuns. But for laypeople, the precept enjoins abstaining from sexual relations with an illicit partner. The primary transgression is entering into full sexual union, but all other sexual involvements of a less complete kind may be considered secondary infringements. The main question raised by the precept concerns who is to count as an illicit partner. The Buddha's statement defines the illicit partner from the perspective of the man, but later treatises elaborate the matter for both sexes. For a man, 3 kinds of women are considered illicit partners. 1. A woman who is married to another man. This includes, besides a woman already married to a man, a woman who is not his legal wife, but is generally recognized as his consort, who lives with him or is kept by him or is in some way acknowledged as his partner. All these women are illicit partners for men other than their own husbands. This class would also include a woman engaged to another man. But a widow or divorced woman is not out of bounds, provided she is not excluded for other reasons. 2. A woman still under protection. This is a girl or woman who is under the protection of her mother, father, relatives, or others rightfully entitled to be her guardians. This provision rules out elopements or secret marriages, contrary to the wishes of the protecting party. 3. A woman prohibited by convention. This includes close female relatives forbidden as partners by social tradition, nuns and other women under a vow of celibacy, and those prohibited as partners by the law of the land. From the standpoint of a woman, two kinds of men are considered illicit partners. 1. For a married woman, any man other than her husband is out of bounds. Thus, a married woman violates the precept if she breaks her vow of fidelity to her husband. But a widow or divorcee is free to remarry. 2. For any woman, any man forbidden by convention, such as close relatives and those under a vow of celibacy, is an illicit partner. Besides these, any case of forced, violent, or coercive sexual union constitutes a transgression. But in such a case the violation falls only on the offender, not on the one compelled to submit. The positive virtue corresponding to the abstinence is, for laypeople, marital fidelity. Husband and wife should each be faithful and devoted to the other, content with the relationship, and should not risk a breakup to the union by seeking outside partners. The principle does not, however, confine sexual relations to the marital union. It is flexible enough to allow for variations depending on social convention. The essential purpose, as was said, is to prevent sexual relations which are hurtful to others. When mature independent people, though unmarried, enter into a sexual relationship through free consent, so long as no other person is intentionally harmed, no breach of the training factor is involved. Ordained monks and nuns, including men and women who have undertaken the 8 or 10 precepts, are obliged to observe celibacy. They must abstain not only from sexual misconduct, but from all sexual involvements, at least during the period of their vows. The holy life at its highest aims at complete purity in thought, word, and deed, and this requires turning back the tide of sexual desire. Right livelihood. Right livelihood is concerned with ensuring that one earns one's living in a righteous way. For a lay disciple, the Buddha teaches that wealth should be gained in accordance with certain standards. One should acquire it only by legal means, not illegally. One should acquire it peacefully, without coercion or violence. One should acquire it honestly, not by trickery or deceit, and one should acquire it in ways which do not entail harm and suffering for others. The Buddha mentions 5 specific kinds of livelihood which bring harm to others, and are therefore to be avoided. Dealing in weapons, in living beings, including raising animals for slaughter as well as slave trade and prostitution, in meat production and butchery, in poisons, and in intoxicants. He further names several dishonest means of gaining wealth which fall under wrong livelihood. Practicing deceit, treachery, soothsaying, trickery, and usury. Obviously, any occupation that requires violation of right speech and right action is a wrong form of livelihood, but other occupations, such as selling weapons or intoxicants, may not violate those factors and yet be wrong because of their consequences for others. The Thai treatise discusses the positive aspects of right livelihood under the 3 convenient headings of rightness regarding actions, rightness regarding persons, and rightness regarding objects. Rightness regarding actions means that workers should fulfill their duties diligently and conscientiously, not idling away time, claiming to have worked longer hours than they did, or pocketing the company's goods. Rightness regarding persons means that due respect and consideration should be shown to employers, employees, colleagues, and customers. An employer, for example, should assign his workers chores according to their ability, pay them adequately, promote them when they deserve a promotion, and give them occasional vacations and bonuses. Colleagues should try to cooperate rather than compete, while merchants should be equitable in their dealings with customers. Rightness regarding objects means that in business transactions and sales the articles to be sold should be presented truthfully. There should be no deceptive advertising, misrepresentations of quality or quantity, or dishonest maneuvers. Gratitude for tuning in. We've reached the conclusion of Chapter 4. Anticipation builds as we invite you to join us in Chapter 5. Right Mindfulness. Following the Buddha's wisdom, Dharma donation stands as the most profound contribution. The author's dedicated effort encompassing this book aligns with our relentless work at Buddhist audiobook shelf, transforming literature like this into accessible audiobook formats. Your participation in Dharma donation is as simple as subscribing, liking, and sharing this video. Your engagement is pivotal, and we extend our heartfelt thanks for being a valuable part of our community. Looking forward to your presence in the upcoming chapters and continued exploration of enlightenment together.